It's no secret to anyone that China is wielding more and more influence over the movie industry. Last year there was a 13% increase in movie attendance overall, and China being such a big country, that's a lot more people seeing movies. So inevitably what China likes and doesn't like in movies is going to influence the kind of movies Hollywood makes more and more as this trend continues. We've seen The Last Jedi being completely kicked out of the country. Just recently it was announced that the Han Solo movie in China is going to be called Ranger Solo, completely removing the Star Wars name in an effort to have that movie perform better in China. So you really do have to ask yourself, since China's taste in movies is going to influence which movies succeed and fail, how is that going to change our movies? And what are some ways in which Hollywood could try to facilitate the needs of the Chinese audience? Well, I've delved into this question and I've found 3 things that I think Hollywood needs to know. Initially in researching this video, I started out by looking at which American movies do well in China, and the only things I could really find that they have in common is they have robots, they have monsters, they have big over-the-top cartoonish type of characters. But I thought to myself, there has to be more to it than just that, otherwise they would have liked Star Wars a lot more than they did. And I realized that I was looking at this from the wrong perspective. I realized I need to look at the Chinese movies that have done well in China and then see how they are different to Hollywood movies. Once I did this, everything became a lot clearer, and this I think is the #1 rule Hollywood needs to know about China. I think Hollywood, as I did in researching this video, makes the mistake of thinking that second-rate Hollywood movies are going to naturally do well in China because, yeah, there's not much other choice out there. This is a badly mistaken opinion, and I myself am guilty of this as well. Just by simply looking at the trailers for some of these Chinese movies, you can see that Chinese cinema is at least as good, in many ways actually better than Hollywood. Which means that the Chinese have options in terms of what movies they're going to make. So you can't just think, oh, we'll throw in a Chinese actor and all these Chinese will go see it. No, they have better options than that. They're not stupid. China is the country with the highest average IQ in the whole world. So basically Hollywood just needs to raise its bar if it wants to compete in these markets against the local movies. And this leads me to my second point. So the top Chinese movies are Wolf Warrior 2, which is basically like a Chinese Rambo by the looks of things, with a sort of international flavor to it. So imagine like Taken crossed with Rambo, but from the Chinese perspective.
Alright, let's move out, boys!
Next is a movie called The Mermaid, which is a comedy which actually looks very funny.
是一半人一半鱼的美人鱼。不是左和右，是上和下。它上面是人，下面是鱼。头呢？
It has a lot of action and it also sort of has an environmental message to it. Then there's Monster Hunt, which appears to be a man who becomes pregnant and gives birth to a monster and then has to fight off all these monster hunters to protect his son? And also a movie called Never Say Die, which is a body swap comedy in which a guy and a girl wake up in each other's bodies, and the guy being an MMA fighter, the girl in the body needs to learn how to fight. So you find that with a lot of these, there's sort of a bizarre, wacky, but also really interesting premise to it. People swapping bodies, a man giving birth to a monster, a mermaid. They're all a little bit weird and wacky. So an interesting premise that is also a little bit weird seems like it will do well in China. So like, I don't know, a movie about every time a guy takes a dump, he changes gender or something like that would apparently do well in China. One thing that really comes through that is different about the Chinese movies versus the American movies is the Chinese, they're at a place in their culture where they're very proud of their culture, they're very proud of their heritage, they're very proud of their country. And all of these movies in some way is a celebration of their heritage. This is coming at a time though when in the West, it's the exact opposite. We're ashamed of our culture, we're tearing down our statues, we're deconstructing our history and our heritage. This is the exact opposite of what's happening in China. And I think this might be a big part of why it is that The Last Jedi didn't do so well in China. Because so much of that, the whole theme of that movie was let the past die, kill it if you have to. China doesn't want to let the past die. China is proud of their past. The Chinese actually have a word called baijuo, which is a derogatory term that means white leftist. Basically, it's a derogatory term for the social justice warriors. They don't like baijuos. In fact, many young people actually view baijuo culture as a direct attack on Chinese heritage and Chinese culture. So now you see it's starting to come a bit clearer as to why The Last Jedi got booted out of the country. So what this means is for movies to succeed in China, they either need to have a healthy pride in their heritage or at least avoid the whole baijuo deconstructionism. None of that stuff sells very well in China. I don't think the Russians like it either, and at least half of America doesn't like it. So it's just not economically viable. So it's probably a good policy for all of Hollywood to take up. So these are the three main points that I think Hollywood should bear in mind when focusing on the Chinese market. Don't pander to them, recognize that their movies in many cases are actually better than yours. You need to come up with an interesting and somewhat wacky premise to get all the Chinese people's attention. And third, don't be a baijuo. But I gotta say, after having done all this research, I'm actually gonna get a lot more involved in Chinese movies. I'm gonna watch a lot more of them because it just seems that at a time when Hollywood is stagnating and is not being very original and is kind of going through an identity crisis as well as lots of other stuff that's happening in Hollywood, the Chinese cinema just seems to be like something new and fresh and interesting. It's a breath of fresh air in a room full of farts. So I might actually review some of these movies. And you know what? I'd actually encourage you guys to look into these movies as well. I am Bandit, this is Bandit Incorporated. Until next time, I will see you guys in the comments.